Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to vlog 133. At risk. At risk. I know the title At Risk sounds a little like a New Order album that was released after the global financial crisis, but I promise it has meaning. Today's vlog has an interesting origin, as many of them do. Our supervisors, our fabulous supervisors at Flinders University, wanted me to do a professional development session for them on at risk. And so I always wondered what that phrase sort of meant. At risk students, at risk research, at risk candidature, at risk relationship between the student and the supervisor. Well, indeed, at risk can refer to any and all of these variables. But as I always say, I think students, whether we're talking about first year students in an undergraduate program or all of you, our wonderful research masters and PhD students, students have a right to know the sociology of success and the sociology of failure. You have a right to understand and hear the characteristics of a student that makes it, a characteristic of a student that does not make it, and indeed the variables that we as supervisors monitor as meaningful to question, maybe something is going wrong here. And there is a list of at-risk characteristics. It's been researched pretty effectively around the world, and it's that list that I'm going to share with you today in this vlog. Remember, you are brilliant. You are. You are wise and you are reflexive. So when I list for you the characteristics of a student that may not make it through the program, then you're wise enough, if you have one of those characteristics, to say and pause and think, wow, that's a bit of a challenge. I've just exhibited one of those characteristics. Let's find a way to reflect on that and self-correct. And the final point I want to make today, before I start that list, that sociological list of the students at risk, is I just wanted to state very clearly that these variables are not causal. The variables I'm talking about today are correlative. So what that means is the PhD space is very, very complicated. There are many levers that we all have that create success and failure. So it's never one of those andragogical or teaching and learning spaces where if you do this, then this happens. It doesn't work like that in doctoral education. But the variables that I'm talking about today are characteristics of things that are going wrong. If you show one of these, it doesn't mean you're going to fail or you're not going to complete. But if you show one of these variables, it is time for you to have a pause, have a think, regroup, and reconfigure. Doctoral education has lots and lots of different ways to create success and lots of ways to create failure. And what we're talking about today is that in-between space that may be is going to show that something is going wrong. So let's list them, shall we? Let's do this. So characteristic one of at-risk students. 1, students lose motivation. I always try and make sure, as you know, that my PhD students do not start the program until they have 10 characteristics and 10 motivations that show they're actually going to make it. Why are they doing it? Why do they care? Why is this important to them now? So I make sure they've listed those motivations, why they're in the program. But it is important to remember that a PhD is a marathon and not a sprint. And those motivations can change. And we see all sorts of attributes when a student loses motivation. And they can be social, they can be intellectual, they can be cultural, they can really just show a lack of disinterest. They can just sort of drift away from the program. So you begin a PhD with passion, all of us do. You come into the program excited and vibed up and passionate, but you know what? That passion is not enough for you to finish. You're going to require determination. You're going to require guts, and you're going to require gumption. Passion will not sustain you. It is not enough. So the best students replace that passion with dogged determination to finish. So a student that is at risk is not able to transfer and transform that initial excitement into something that creates that sustained success. So never ever in a PhD program underestimate motivation. Motivation is everything. An unmotivated student does not succeed. Boom. 2, change of supervisors. So this characteristic of at-risk students really demonstrates my point that the variables I'm discussing today are correlative, not causal, because of course about 40% of PhD students change their supervisor on the way through. Okay, so it's not causal, but if you change supervisors, then you are less likely to finish your program. Having said that, and noting that we in the Office of Graduate Research, we're doing a lot of work on the research supervision at the moment. We're looking a lot particularly at how supervisors rescue a student and how that rescue can be successful. So that's a whole area that we're looking at. So fantastic supervisors who find a student that everyone has said is not going to finish, and that supervisor allows that student to finish. So we're looking at what exactly is going on there to create that success. So I'm very aware that the rescue supervision issue is a big one. And sometimes there are truly dreadful experiences that happen between a student and a supervisor that really you have to change supervisors, and you're not going to be successful with that supervisor or pool of supervisors. So I'm not questioning that. And you know, there are certain students that definitely will not finish with that supervisory team. But what I always say to students who sit in this office and think, oh look, I'm going to change supervisors, I always say to them, changing supervisors is not the holy grail. So it can be a frying pan to fire type of situation, okay? So all I would tell you is this, and this is a hard truth. When we look at the student record of our students, our candidates that don't finish, so these are the students who have exited the program, the overwhelming characteristic that we see is a laundry list of supervisors. So they've bounced from supervisor to supervisor to supervisor to supervisor, and they don't finish. So think about that. Variable 3, at risk. Oh yeah, this is the big one. Supervisors change universities. So the supervisors get another job. Now variable 3 is really an appendix to variable 2. If supervisors change universities, then their PhD students who remain are at risk. And that's really one of the primary jobs of an Office of Graduate Research or a Centre for Graduate Research, this sort of organisation, because when a supervisor leaves, it's really all battle stations for us, because we have to move in quickly and try and create a supervisory suite to enable that student to finish. Now, it won't be perfect. That's the point. The perfect supervisor has left. That's not an option. So what we have to try and do is configure a group of supervisors who can get those students through. And that's a priority. So remember that, incredibly important. And that's when an Office of Graduate Research really matters, because when your supervisor leaves to take on another job, it really matters, and the students frequently don't finish. Yep. 4, we're going to go to a gendered characteristic now. Female students who have a child during a candidature. And why I'm smiling is male students who have a child during a candidature, it doesn't impact on their completion rates. Now, I've supervised incredibly, fantastically successful women who have had at least one child. I've had one student that had two children, at least one child during a candidature, okay? So success is absolutely possible, and these are fantastic women, and it's a really great experience, I think, for everybody. But these women that have been successful are incredibly disciplined, have a supportive partner, have a supportive family, and they work, wow, incredibly hard. So the trick is, with this type of candidature, is to work incredibly hard and without interruption during the pregnancy, and to have a very good understanding of the thesis post the birth and how childcare will operate in that candidature. There needs to be a plan. And if the supervisor that you've selected is not experienced in this type of candidature, then it sometimes does not end well. There must be family support, that's absolutely crucial. And if they haven't got a supportive family, supportive partner, and a supervisor that andragogically understands what's going to have to happen here, then wow, these fantastic women do have a real battle on their hands. So what I'd say to any woman out there who's seeing this anywhere in the world and you're thinking of having a child during a candidature, then that has to be at the forefront of your mind when you are selecting a supervisor. You have to interview them, you have to be honest, and that supervisor has to be really experienced in this very specific candidature. There are andragogical techniques to get that student through, get a student who has a child during a candidature through, but hoping for the best, you won't finish. 5. The student runs out of money. Yeah. Now, this is a really counterintuitive point, this one. Scholarship students that run out of scholarship are at risk, okay? The students that start without funding, so in other words, they've had to have a part-time job all the way through, their candidatures are fine. Bizarre. So they're not at risk. But losing a scholarship, so running out of scholarship, is a characteristic of a student at risk and a student that does not finish their program. So if you have a scholarship, then please make sure that your submission date for that PhD and the completion of your scholarship happens at the same time. Wow. If you don't, if those dates are staggered or lagged, then problems hit. Full stop. 6. The student cannot manage the pressure and the stress. Right. There are a series of proxies for this particular at-risk characteristic, and indeed we talk a great deal at the moment about the mental health concern of PhD students. For me, that's not really specific enough. People are talking about mental health. What exactly are we talking about? Mental health is a big thing. What invariably we're talking about in the doctoral space is anxiety and depression, particularly those two variables. And anxiety and depression, they are getting in the way of a student completing their research. There are many causes for that anxiety and depression. Length of candidature is one of them. But also the key characteristic, the andragogical element where supervisors can make a difference, is the configuring of short-term goals, short-term achievements. So if a supervisor and a student have a lack of a plan, like we're just doing this, we just enter it and we just sort of swan around in it with a lack of backward mapping, then wow, that is a dangerous situation for creating anxiety and depression. So therefore, what students and supervisors need to do is create a series of micro achievements or goals and achieve them. Wow, I've done this. So it's not simply, oh wow, it's a PhD. All I'm doing today is this goal. All I'm doing this week is this goal. All I'm doing for this year is getting to this point. So it's the students that have the momentum, the micro goals, and the backward mapping from candidature that reduce anxiety, stress, and depression. So think about it in your own candidature, create those short-term goals and achievements, and give yourself credit for those achievements. Yeah. At-risk characteristic 7. Oh yeah. Let's do this. Students are not self-starters. Yeah. So this characteristic links up motivation and supervisory issues. So the students who do not finish blame other people for all their issues and concerns that happen to them. I have a lot of students, by the way, that come into this office and they would like to start a PhD, and the students I know that are not going to finish are the ones that sit right there and say, oh Tara, if you just tell me what to do, then I'll do it, and that's how I'll get the PhD. Actually, they're the last people that should be enrolled in a PhD program. The self-starters are the ones that are going to be successful. The successful students look in the mirror and they claim responsibility for their actions. Claiming responsibility means that you maintain control. If we relinquish power, then all our successes and all our failures and all our happinesses have been placed in the hands of other people. So you can see what's happening here. Successful students are centered, they're calm, and they control what they can control. At-risk students externalize blame. Yeah. 8, risk factor 8. Moving between full-time and part-time enrollment. So another variable that configures an at-risk enrollment is a movement from full-time to part-time enrollment. Can I say the inverse, part-time to full-time enrollment, has no impact of any kind on the at-risk status. In fact, it increases the chance of success. So full-time to part-time is a proxy for a series of variables. The student is feeling stressed, there may be financial issues, there may be family issues, and there is a desire to slow progress. So that becomes a problem. So changing modes of enrollment, that's a risk factor. 9. Oh yeah, taking intermission. And around the world, by the way, this is called suspension. At Flinders, we use the word intermission, but to suspend one's candidature. So if you stop or suspend your candidature for a time, this is one of the biggest indicators that we have that you are about to withdraw permanently. So the reason being is you have taken intermission, you have suspended your candidature for a reason. So instead of addressing the problem, and there's all sorts of different problems that happen in 3 years, but instead of addressing that problem, you stop. So it's not solving the problem, it's just stopping the candidature. So what I always say to students is, if you've got a problem in a PhD, address the problem and keep going with the PhD. But what happens is when you disconnect from a thesis temporarily, it's simply one more step to disengage from it permanently. Characteristic 10. At risk, long candidatures. Now I finished with this one because this is the biggie, and all the other 9 variables we discussed feed into this last one. So the characteristic of students that do not finish their PhD is a long candidature. With a long candidature, you are leaving yourself open for all the other variables that we've discussed in the vlog today. So money, family situations, the supervisor leaves the university, mental health concerns. So the reason why I am so focused on short candidatures, and I know my nagging really upsets students and really upsets supervisors, my heart bleeds. The reason why I am so focused on this is because the characteristic of success is a short candidature. The longer the candidature goes, the less likely you are to finish. So obviously, I care about this. 3 years is doable. Tell you why. You can almost see the ending with good backward mapping, good milestones and planning. 3 years you can see. 3 years you can manage whatever life may throw at us. But anything longer, life happens to you. Yeah. So what I think we learn from this at-risk discussion today is we keep our candidatures short. Choose your supervisors well, particularly if you are a woman thinking of having a child during the candidature. Supervisory selection matters. And also work on that supervisory relationship and control what you can control. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.